listening to First Contact, Stories of the Call Center, a podcast brought to you by NobelBiz, your all-in-one contact center solution. Every month, our host, Christian Montes, talks to tech leaders and entrepreneurs who found their way into the contact center industry.
Everybody, welcome to another episode of First Contact, Stories of the Call Center. Super excited for you today. We have a great treat. I'm happy to be joined by the CEO of Benchmark Portal, host of CallTalk, and one of the overall top people in the contact center industry. Bruce Belfiore is here with us today. Super excited because if you've ever thought about looking into call center training, benchmarking, certification, this is definitely the area that you really need to focus into. He's got decades of experience helping contact centers all around the world, reducing costs, optimizing processes, obviously, again, maximizing profits. He's a very busy guy, podcasts, work, educational videos, tons of things that consume him. But here's the thing. He's made time to come spend it with us. Bruce, welcome to the show. Glad to have you on.
Hi, Christian. Well, thanks very much for having me on the show. I'm really delighted to be here with you.
Absolutely. And, you know, the theme of the show is really to start off with, what's your story? How did you get into the contact center space? We always have this joke that people go, hey, I woke up one morning and my career aspirations were, let's work in the contact center space. That's not always the case. So we always want to find out what got you here. You know, what's your background? Where did you start? And then what pulled you in and kept you here?
Sure. Okay. Well, I have graduate degrees in law and business, and I actually started out in finance, banking, investment banking in the U.S. and the U.K., and then management consulting with the Bain Group over in Italy. I'm actually dual national, both American and Italian, which gives me quite a bit of flexibility, actually, as well as opportunities to consume really good food and wine. So it's a good background to have. And I was also a CFO and COO. And really, Christian, all of these experiences showed me the importance of customer service in different contexts. And while I was in Italy, a friend got me interested in contact centers, an area that I didn't know anything about at the time. This was back in the 90s, and I just found it fascinating. And that led me to meet Dr. John Anton and Professor Richard Feinberg of Purdue University. And they started the first benchmarking of call centers back in 1995. And I loved the analytical component of what they were doing. So I joined the effort. We now have a ton of data, a ton of experience helping contact center managers take their metrics and interpret what they need to do to become more competitive, both in terms of costs and in terms of quality, to become truly excellent in their industry. So it kind of brought together the finance background, the analytical background that came from the consulting, and also I wanted to do something entrepreneurial. I'd worked for a lot of large companies, and this was a great opportunity to do something new and entrepreneurial, and it's been a lot of fun.
Well, that's great. And I think when you talk about being able to measure things, that helps you manage the business, and you go back to the data, right? Which is really important. But you really have a big focus on training. I'd love to know more about, from your perspective, what made you choose that training was something critical, one of those pillars for the business, and how did you approach that specifically, and what is it that you do and offer in the training space?
Okay, no, that's a great question, Christian, and wow, yeah, training is really so important. One of the things we discovered when comparing the benchmarking results of top centers against average or lower quartile centers is the quality and quantity of the training that they have, actually. People would say to us, okay, now you've benchmarked us, you've shown us where we really stink, what should we do about it? And so many times it came back to training. So we ended up developing curricula that became the College of Call Center Excellence. And we provide curricula that are really super rich in best practices for all levels of contact center professional. And our manager training has been going strong for over 2 decades. We've added courses for workforce management, quality assurance, coaching, supervisors, and agents. And, you know, all of these are important professional levels inside the contact center people should be trained as contact center professionals, as customer service professionals. That's our belief, and that's what comes through the training that we do. And all of those courses can either be taught in person, live online, or on demand. And actually, we finished up the last on-demand course just before the pandemic hit, Christian. So, boy, the timing on that was really good, and they become super popular. You also asked about our approach. Well, we leverage really this long experience in contact centers and training, and we funnel the great content we've learned into the curricula and in terms of development and delivery best practices. And naturally, the courses address themes that are common across all contact centers. But we can help managers develop specialized curricula for their specific centers if we're asked to do so. So we really love teaching. The Purdue University origins of our group really have stuck with us. And we've actually started many of our best relationships with companies who have started off by using our courses. So, in fact, if anyone listening to this program is interested in trying out one of our courses, they can come to our website, input the promo code Nobel20, and we'll give them a 20% discount on the courses, valid through the end of 2021. So happy to make that available, Christian, if that's okay with you.
Well, that's awesome. And I think anyone who's listening can absolutely take that code. You heard it, Nobel20, get 20% off on a program. And look, when I look at training and I sit there and go, everyone says they have training, right? Everyone says, I have a training program, I onboard, I have training. But what do you think from your perspective, what have you seen is the biggest lacking in training? Is it the fact that they don't do enough training for a long enough period? They don't have ongoing training? The training of itself is too one-dimensional, where it's just at somebody versus with them? Anything that you could throw out as a nugget of stuff that people should take into account when they go, why would I even consider more training? My training's sufficient enough.
Right. And in some cases it is, but the things that we see are really all over the board. So in some cases, there's not enough training. In other cases, it seems to go on forever and it isn't really necessary to do it that long. It just needs to be done more efficiently. So the main thing to do is to make sure that you're choosing the right people for what you want to do. That is to say, people who can be trained, because not everybody is meant to be a customer service representative or supervisor or anything else. And so you need to make sure that the raw material, the human raw material, if you will, is appropriate to begin with. And then do things that are in keeping with good learning practices. So don't throw the kitchen sink and everything at everybody all at once and expect it to stick, because it won't. We all know that things will, fall off over time. So having a process that's appropriate for your center and that includes, for instance, generalized soft skills training, as well as the specific training for your center. Make sure that people can absorb it. Talk to them about it as you go through the training. Make sure that they're in fact absorbing it. Always be open to questions, because in some cases there's kind of a forced march and people feel like they're being, pushed down a funnel, instead of opening them up to really the great aspects of being a customer service professional. So those are the things that I'd say, you need to look at. And the other thing is to ask. Ask them how they're doing as they go through the process. Ask them if they have, absorbed things, what they like, what they don't like. And then, after a certain period of time, test. See if they are, obviously you're testing all the way through, but then also see sometime after the training whether it has stuck or whether you have to do some refresher training.
Totally makes sense. Closing the loop, feedback, and then obviously making sure that the information is retained, right? Because otherwise, it's great that they knew it right away, but then a month, 2 months, 3 months later, if that stuff isn't being reinforced or remembered, then it kind of defeats the purpose. You get that bump, and then all of a sudden that drop. So let's talk about benchmarking, right? We understand that you're one of the top benchmarkers in the contact center space. You say, hey, we have one of the first and largest databases for the metrics and contact center pretty much anywhere in the world. So what does that even mean? And, how did that even come about?
Yeah, no, it's a fun story. We actually started as a student project, believe it or not, at Purdue back in 1995. Okay, so there were a ton of paper surveys that were mailed out to a mailing list of call center managers, asking them to please input all of their metrics, things like average speed of answer, average talk time, average after-call work time, first contact resolution, all that sort of thing. And most of this information came directly from ACD reports, management reports that the centers have. Then what we did was to take all that wonderful information, put it into a database, and work with the numbers to then come up with averages and send back participants with a report showing their metric side by side with the average. Okay? Over time, this became more sophisticated. Information is now input online or else sent automatically from the ACD to us without human intervention, which of course makes things easier. And we have about 40 industry separate sectors so that you're compared against contact centers in your own industry. It's not the whole world. It's, for instance, if you are in the life insurance industry, you're going to be compared to life insurance industry companies and call centers. And so it's very apples to apples. It's useful to see how you stack up against your competitive peers. And when I say competitive, I mean this is also, we have government sector and nonprofit. And if you're in those sectors as well, you should be comparing yourself to see how you're doing. Because it's just professionally the right thing to do. And we've gotten very good at pointing to areas of weakness. Okay, so in some cases, your side-by-side metric shows a delta over to the side. It's in green, it means you're doing well, and that's good. If it's in red, it means you're doing worse than the industry average. And that's something you should really focus on in order to see what you can do. So one of the things we've done a lot of is to map those negative gaps over to people, process, and technology issues that in fact can move that metric. Okay, so the idea is you don't just benchmark and put it on the shelf. You benchmark, see where you're not doing well, and that starts a very creative and very positive process of figuring out what you need to do to improve those by changing your people, process, and technology ways of doing things. And the benchmarking shows you where to focus, and the methodology really brings you to the people, process, and technology issues that will then help you become an excellent center and do the best you can.
Well, that's huge, because if you think about it, if you're an outsourcer and you're competing for business, it's very easy to know how you're benchmarking against your direct competition for the business you're trying to get. But when you don't look at it from that perspective, if you're just a retailer comparing yourself to another retailer, and healthcare to another healthcare, government to government, nonprofit, so on and so forth, you only have your internal metrics or external metrics that you pull in to try to see how well you're doing towards your goals or towards the business outcomes. But when you have these benchmarks where you're able to see how you're faring towards other people that do similar work in a similar space, you can start to see maybe there are areas that you can improve. And there's that old saying, you don't know what you don't know. So until you actually start to see some of that stuff, then you can do something about it. And I think that the people, process, and technology part was huge. When you start seeing that there is an area of improvement, then now you have to go, well, where do I find the places that can improve that? And where are the biggest improvements that I can do right away versus long term? And I think when you talk about all the stuff from the training and the benchmarking, it's great. But now we talk about that third pillar you have, certification, right? You have this program that allows contact centers to be certified, and you had mentioned over 40 verticals. So how does that work, and why is that important to be certified, and what do you get from that?
Okay, great question. Let me start out by saying what the certification takes in terms of statistics, the statistical background of it, and then we can talk about what it means afterwards. So what we do is to divide the performance metrics into two baskets. There's the efficiency, the dollar-related metrics, and the effectiveness or quality-related metrics. For example, calls per agent per hour, average talk time, those are efficiency cost-related metrics. The better you do on them, the more your costs will be down. And customer satisfaction, abandon rate, average speed of answer, those are quality metrics. They're perceptible to the customer. And they will be the sorts of things that, if they're bad, they can actually drive people away. And they'll go, you have to wait too long to get somebody, you abandon, you go to the competition. You don't want that to happen. And so we take each basket of metrics, we put them through expert formulae, and we come up with a efficiency index number and an effectiveness or quality index number. And we plot these on our proprietary 4-quadrant matrix. And the efficiency index is plotted on the x-axis. So think of this, and if you are in the right-hand side of that, then you're more efficient than the average for your industry. Okay, so that shows you're performing in a superior manner. On the quality side, that goes on the y-axis, and if you're above the y-axis, then at that point, so you're plotting on this axis over here. So if you're above, then you're superior in terms of your quality. If you're below, you're inferior compared to your industry sector. So if you're in the upper right-hand quadrant, it means that you are, objectively speaking, performing in a superior way to your industry. So those people are eligible for certification under our program. And managers love this because it is not just a checklist certification where if you do things the way I say you should, then you get certified. But rather, if you, objectively speaking, are performing in a superior fashion against your industry peers, then you get certified. So it's really a results-oriented certification rather than a checklist-oriented certification. And so centers that have been certified with us include companies like GE Health, Canon, New York Life, MetLife, Mayo Clinic, iMed, Delta Dental, Lincoln Financial, United Healthcare, Samsung, Tri. I mean, there's quite a few. You can see them on our website. And many of them, once they do get certified, also will issue press releases and will celebrate the fact with their contact center people. So they get to use the Center of Excellence logo, and it's really quite an achievement. I remember, Christian, one time going to Harris in Las Vegas, and they had gotten certified. They asked me to come and just explain to the agents, right, what this really meant in terms of what they had done and the standards that they now had to live up to. And there was above every cubicle a certification logo that was hanging down. And I just thought this was great. I said to the manager, I said, why did you do that? And she said, because we want everybody who comes in every morning to have pride in what they have done and to realize that they have to live up to high standards. So a lot of it has to do with objectively doing numerically important things, right? But also it has to do with bringing up the morale and really the human potential within the center.
That's awesome. And when you look at it from the perspective of outcomes, right? You had mentioned one thing, people take pride in the work when they see that they're living up to a certain level of excellence, right? But do you see other benefits that happen as a byproduct of you making that, top right-hand quadrant when you hit those quality and performance and measurable outcomes for you to get certified? Because it's not just I passed the test and I did the work. It's I'm meeting and exceeding what the average is for where I'm at in my vertical. When you look at that, do you see anything quantifiable from the business outside of like just, let's say, everything from retention to performance KPIs improving to reducing costs to just having less people missing work, morale? Do you see things like that you're measurably able to see?
Yes. Actually, all the things you just mentioned, we have seen happen. And in one case, for instance, we suggested as one of the things that they needed to do because they didn't get certified at the beginning. Sometimes it takes a while to get certified, but that's okay. It's a continuous improvement process that's really very healthy managerially and organizationally for call centers to actually go through this process. And there's the you find out how you did, then you discuss and discern what it is that you need to do better. Then you pick the improvement initiative and start with the low-hanging fruit, right? The things that are going to be easiest to do at the least cost. And then you implement, and then you measure again and do some calculations to see how much money you've saved and how much your customer satisfaction, for instance, has improved. And you can also do if you've actually taken an initiative where you've spent some money in order to improve things, you can do an ROI analysis. And senior managers love that because it's right up their alley, right? And it also, in many cases, it has brought contact center managers into the inner circle of senior management because it teaches them the language and the techniques that allow them to claim a space at the senior management table. Because why? Because they're adding value to the enterprise. And think about it, Christian. What's more important than the front line of the company and communicating with your customers, right? We are so important. We sometimes undervalue ourselves as an industry, but we're really so important. And if you, in fact, can make sure that your contact center is the leading edge of your competitive strength, that's a huge thing.
Yeah, I think when I look back and I sit there and say, let's look at products and services, more often than not, you're not always interacting with the brand for that product or service. You're just enjoying or not that service or that product. The contact center in many ways is, for many people, the first time they actually experience the company that produces that product or that service. And that's where you could literally improve lifetime value, or you could destroy that relationship and send them off to your competitor. And if that's where you're not spending the time to look at how you're doing against other people in your space, right? How you're able to see how people can get onboarded properly, quickly, and retain that information. And then from there to be able to let those people you just said, all the managers, supervisors, all the people that see data all day long, but they have to be able to justify, why do we do what we do versus this is what we've always done, right? How do we make improvements beyond just what we don't know is really critical. Now, obviously, Benchmark Portal hasn't been doing all of this from day one. I know you had mentioned early on you were doing some things around the database. You've done training and are doing training and certification. Do you have a little kind of brief history of did this all happen at one period of time within like a year or two and you've been doing it ever since, or has this evolved over all the years?
Well, it's evolved over the years, and I think in a sense we mirror what we do with contact centers because it really is a continuous improvement type of approach to things. So, finding out what is needed, in our case, finding out what our industry needs, and then trying to supply something that's really going to be helpful to managers so that they can get better and better, and then keeping that virtuous circle going. After the first benchmarking exercise at Purdue in 1995, the courses started a few years later. We were doing a good bit of consulting by 2000. Then certifications began a year or two later, and we've grown since then. We also publish industry reports that are used by all of the major consulting firms like McKinsey, Bain, et cetera, et cetera. And we've launched automated benchmarking, called iBenchmark. So this is exciting. It's new. And the great thing about iBenchmark is it reduces the amount of time and effort it takes to benchmark because data flows directly from the ACD to our database under a patented process that we have. So we're the only ones who can do that. So it's really cool for time-strapped managers. And as I say, we're launching it now. Also, just another thing that your listeners probably should know about is that we launched our free learning channel on YouTube. So anyone can access a lot of instructive short videos on best practices in call handling and in defining metrics and other topics of interest. And if you just go to our website under resources and find the learning channel, it's blossomed. And what's happened is that a lot of managers and supervisors are now pushing out these videos to their employees to use as part of training and coaching activities. So, for instance, one of them is on, how to calm down angry customers. Another one is, how to connect with customers. There's a whole bunch of soft skill, very, well-defined areas. And so if there's somebody who is having an issue with those soft skills, then we're finding that supervisors or whoever's doing the coaching is now, suggesting that somebody look at this video, because it's something also they can go back to if they need to sort of reinforce it. And they can do that in between coaching sessions. So it becomes also something that's very efficient, but also has a lot of best practices in it. And as I say, that's totally free. People are welcome to do that.
Well, that's great. And let's talk a little bit about those videos. You get to see how many people have seen the videos. And then you also know from the content what you feel is the most important from your perspective. Hey, these are the videos you really need to focus on, or this content is great. Have you seen alignment between the amount of people that are sharing, watching the video content, aligning with what you think is the most important? And if so, what videos are those? And if not, was that surprising for you to see?
Actually, it turns out, we were wondering about that sort of thing. But no, we are finding that it is okay, so for instance, we have the metrics videos that explain metrics. Those are mainly used by managers, right? There are many fewer managers in the world than there are contact center agents. So while those probably have big impact for the people who are watching them, particularly new managers who are saying, geez, I've heard this metric, but I really don't know what it means. I can read it in the Benchmark Portal glossary because we have this long glossary, but we find that people like to listen to stuff rather than read these days, right? So they can do that by doing it. But in terms of numbers, it's really the soft skill agent ones that have to do with connecting with clients, sort of handling calls, and being as present and as good as you can be. Those are the ones that are getting the most. And we're still issuing them. So there's still new ones coming out all the time.
Great. So let's kind of pivot to call center empathy training, right? We've talked about it previously in the show. We talked about emotional intelligence. You just mentioned soft skills. Well, what's your take on that? What's the best way to provide adequate empathy training for agents? And especially since we just ended on agents being the ones that watch the most amount of videos, what's your take on that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it can be, I think it's really important. It's oftentimes overlooked. We don't always screen for people who have the best probability of being empathetic. And what I mean by that is going back to what I said before about the best human raw material when did you take into your center. You can do screening for personality traits as well as for communication style. And, depending on what kind of sector you're in, that can be important. Obviously, it can change also from sector to sector. So if you're in the hospitality industry, it's going to be different perhaps than if you are hiring somebody for tech support, right? Those, you don't have to have the same necessarily skills or approaches or personality type on the tech support side that you might want to have somebody have for the hospitality and travel industry. So, you can address it also on two levels. There's an adequate level and a sophisticated level in terms of that empathy training. Adequate training is what most centers do, and it teaches the agent more or less to recognize the issue and get a feel for the communication style and mental state of the customer, even though it's not always expressed as well as it could be. And then you obviously leverage those insights to show some genuine empathy for the customer. And here, if you have the right person there, it's not a put-on. They're genuine. People in customer service roles who are meant to be there are people who love to give that kind of service. So it's genuine for them. And that's good. A sophisticated level of empathy can require more training in recognizing the personality type and the communication style of the person that they're talking to, and actually use that to either mirror or to guide the conversation in a way that's going to have the best outcome.
They used to call me the fixer. From the first day I started working in a contact center, I became indispensable. Emotions had the best of me. I was very focused, business-driven, and careful in everything I did. I was the know-it-all guy. If there was a problem, I was the person to solve it. If there was a customer experience situation that was going out of hand, I was the one they called. Everything was working smoothly. After a while, I started my own contact center company. I had many agents working for me. Nothing could stand in my way. And then this happened. Technology. It came like a hurricane. It threw away all my future plans and desires. Social media platforms, AI, integrated software, virtual engagement, cloud management. Contact centers were getting more complex each day and things were getting out of hand. Until one day, I was searching for a solution on the internet and there it was, waiting for me, the savior, the answer, the knight in shining armor. Yes, I'm talking about NobelBiz. I met these experts enabling the intelligent contact center, and it changed my life. I could say that they fixed me. Yeah, they fixed the fixer. First, they introduced me to the carrier of carriers, which gave me huge potential for my contact center. With the best quality at the lowest price, it increased my contact rates, saved me money, and gave us the opportunity to get the highest standard in customer experience. But that was not all. They introduced me to amazing productivity tools that gave me and my contact center immense strength and adaptability. And then came the cherry on top, their Omnichannel, OmniPlus solution, which gave my contact center access to all communication channels in one system. It's so easy to install, and it really helped grow my business overnight. Nowadays, no one calls me the fixer anymore. I kind of miss it. Since the number of our clients has doubled, I don't really understand how I became slightly redundant. But on the other hand, I make some amazing coffee. So take your business to higher ground and start using NobelBiz. Go to NobelBiz.com and see why they're called the promise keepers of the industry. They should be called the promise fixers, but anyways.
So when we talk about empathy, though, and you had given some examples where it's more important potentially overall if you're going to paint a broad brush, and then other times where maybe there's other skills that are more important in that environment. But have you seen from an ongoing perspective, what is it that you have to do to make sure that people are actually being empathetic on calls? I mean, because obviously you're not listening to every call, or how do people know that in situations where empathy is actually the thing that probably would have made a better outcome for that call was the thing that you were missing? Any insight into what you've seen or manage or teach or have people doing to be able to measure that or see that that's even happening post-training?
Right. Great question. And so one of the things that obviously helps out a lot is if you have post-call surveys. And hopefully post-call surveys that are taken up by a reasonably large percentage, still a small percentage, but as many as possible of the people who are coming on the phone. And that way you can actually match your coaching to what the customer said, which is the most important thing. And what we've seen is the most sophisticated centers, Christian, have both very heavily relied on the customer satisfaction feedback, right? And let me make one distinction too, if I can put in a parentheses here.
Sure.
Use that for coaching purposes appropriately if you are doing smaller samples. If you're actually going to judge the agent on it for purposes of promotion and pay, et cetera, then you as a manager owe it to your agents to get a statistically significant sample over the course of a year to do that. So if you're finding that you're going to use, 2 a month for 24 at the end of the year, and then you're going to actually use that for promotion, and that's all you've done. That's not a statistical sample. You should not feel good about that as a manager. On the other hand, if you have a statistically valid sample, you've got 200-300 of these over the course of a year, then you can feel much better about using it for that purpose. I'll close that parenthesis and just go back to saying that the the empathy training there is something that can be done, as I said, for coaching purposes, even with small samples. And one of the things that will happen in some cases is that people will actually get good response on their customer satisfaction, but the coach will still feel that they are not having the kind of inflection or empathy that they are looking for as part of the branding of the company. Okay? Mm-hmm. They want them to be even more so. And that's a tough one for the coach. And the best thing that can happen in those, one of the reasons we did these videos is because sometimes by saying, well, look, don't just listen to me, listen to this video. Maybe that can convince you what you need to do in terms of managing the call and managing the customer contact in a way that will be more fruitful.
Totally makes sense. And I want to kind of pivot a little bit because there's something that you do that's pretty unique outside of everything that you're talking about here. But on LinkedIn, you've mentioned that for contact centers and the nonprofit sector, that you offer discounted service to them. And it's to help them assist in fulfilling their charitable mission, which is in your own way kind of just helping out charity and doing your part in that to help enable them to deliver their mission, which is awesome. But do you have any examples of people that have taken you up on that offer that have had good outcomes and something that you're proud of?
Absolutely. Actually, that's something that is very important to us. And if anybody's listening who's with a nonprofit, we will give you discounts and we will try to work with you. And, we believe in what so many nonprofits do. I'm an assistant scoutmaster. I started back when my son was in scouting and I've just continued. And, I think giving back is really important. And so that's one of the things we do as a company to give back. And I think of, for instance, the County of Los Angeles Mental Health Helpline that sent people to our courses so that they could get the training that they needed, and got a wonderful response from them in terms of what that meant for them. I'm a Rotarian as well, member of Rotary, and so Rotary has actually been certified by Benchmark Portal. And I think you may know that Rotary is a worldwide organization, nonprofit, that is dedicated to doing basically building community in every community where it's present, and to doing good things in other places. They have done more to eradicate polio in the world than any other organization, and they've been joined by the Gates Foundation now and by others. But really, that started the eradication of polio in terms of a large-scale effort. Started with Rotary, and so. Those are the kinds of things and kind of organizations that we're really happy to help out with, and happy to help with others as well. Some of them are in the sort of the hotline, mental health hotline areas, and others also in the healthcare area. So, for instance, foundations that are involved in that.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of those areas have also been critical during the pandemic, right, for a variety of reasons. And with that said, I'm sure that you've come across scenarios during the pandemic that really highlighted what contact centers could do, how people come together, how individual people within the contact center become heroes. With that said, do you have any particular stories or situations that you ran into during the pandemic or even till now that really showcase some of these things?
Well, we did, we're going back to February, March of 2020. When people were really scrambling, trying to figure out what to do because they had just been told you have to send everybody home. You remember that time, I'm sure, Christian. And so we put together very quickly a town hall, and we got 3 managers for different sized companies. And it was really very, very good in terms of the content because they gave great advice on what they did, what worked and what didn't work, and also the feedback that we got on it. So, I think, Christian, in this area, a lot of it has to do with sharing. And so what we've done is to try to listen to our clients and our user base, if you will, and then to, share appropriate best practices with the industry through the things that we do, including CallTalk, et cetera.
for a lot of people, the pandemic meant working remote. Not everybody, of course, but for a lot of people that was not the norm. That became the norm. And for those that were already doing it, they found some changes. Anything in particular at Benchmark Portal or even for you, Bruce, that really impacted what you did as a business because of the pandemic?
Well, as a business, we've always been a distributed organization. So with the kind of things that we do, I just look for the best talent wherever they happen to be. So we have colleagues going from New England to California, and then we also have some colleagues overseas as well. So we've always been sort of a distributed organization. The employees we had here in Santa Barbara, California, where we're based, obviously had to go home and still are. And it worked out. I mean, it turns out that it works out. And I think that, what we found was that the advice we'd been giving to others, because we've been giving advice about at-home agents way before the pandemic. And so the concepts that were embodied in that changed in the sense of having to become more urgent. Before it was, take those people who are doing really well, that you've acculturated in your brick and mortar center, and allow them to work from home, give them the flexibility, make sure that you have proper supervision of them. But, this is definitely something that's a good thing to do, and you'll probably find out you get greater productivity from it. And now it turned into sort of a mass thing. But it worked. And in many cases, we've done studies since then, and the latest survey showed that for the survey group, 15% of agents were working from home before the pandemic. There was 80% at the time of the survey, which was in February, and that people expected post-pandemic it would still be about 50% of people working from home, but still deciding what to do on that.
Yeah, and I've heard the hybrid model being embraced, not all or nothing. There's some form of hybrid depending on which agents, representative supervisors work well in-house versus what the client or security concerns or whatever is required for at home versus inside. But, you had mentioned training at home. Let's talk about the contact center agents that work remote. Let's talk about how do you actually train them correctly and efficiently. You said you were doing it before the pandemic, so obviously there was a sense of urgency, you said. But how did you go about telling people, hey, this is what you have to do to effectively and correctly train people to work remote?
Mm-hmm. So with the training, the curriculum was already there, right? And what it had to do was go from a classroom situation to an online live online situation for these centers. And that can be enriched with on-demand certification courses. So mixing those appropriately so that you get the live online training that gives the information, has the testing so that people actually know what to do. Ties in, one of the things I didn't mention is tie this training in as, really closely to obviously the knowledge management system, which is extremely important and something that people have to do. All of those things, and then considering yourself as a trainer, somebody who's sort of always available to help out, rather than I go into the classroom in the brick and mortar thing and I take care of what I have to do, and then that's it. Over to the supervisors and managers to take care of them. You have to be more available, I think, as a training, and also keep your eyes open, your ears open, and figure out what you need to do to improve over time.
So when we talk about the database that you had, I know we talked about what's made of and how you use it, but seeing now going forward, let's kind of talk about what are you seeing from your database and your experience and what you're seeing metrics-wise and how they're shifting and what people are doing. What do you see trending right now in the industry, and where do you see it going? Anything in particular you can share with our audience from your side?
Yeah. So what we're finding is that, there's a lot of people who were not benchmarking back 20 years ago are benchmarking now. And so they know what they need to do to get better. And the level of management sophistication is much higher now than it was 20 years ago. So there's going to be sort of an effect where the low-hanging fruit is starting to run out, if you will. So the first call resolution rates, for instance, went up 10% in the decade from about 2005 to 2015. Now it's pretty much leveled off. In a number of other areas, we've also seen that happen. And one area where things continue to proceed is with the automation of calls. So the number of calls handled by the IVR, and now we have to say the IVR and virtual agents. There's a half a dozen terms that's used for automated assistance on calls. But basically that continues. The majority of calls for some time actually have been handled by the IVR or / virtual agents, and that's continuing. I think will continue.
Got it. So when we talk about, multiple channels, omni-channel, not everyone does it. Everyone talks about it, and it's talked about it forever, but still there's a lot of data that's siloed, a lot of systems that are siloed, a lot of technology that is bolted on over time. And then there's obviously adoption of systems that have a lot of this stuff in it already. From a benchmarking and metrics perspective, did you see that it was like, hey, this is improving because people are getting better at it and they're adopting it? Or do you still see that there's maybe not best practices yet of really truly embracing omni-channel and other variations where you could sit there and go, this is how I can properly benchmark, because I'm benchmarking not just what I'm seeing, but what could be done to optimize these things and get better performance or better outcomes? You got any insight in what you're seeing in those developments?
What we're seeing is a mixed picture. So the idea is that we have been big proponents of knocking down silos for a long time, and this is silos in every direction. But that also includes the channels. So, for instance, I can remember going into a center some time ago that was a contact center just for calls, and working with them to have them also work on everything from emails to chat to social media. And so what they did was to actually rotate people through these things. It was a good way of finding out what people were best at as well. And in fact, there were two people who were monitoring social media. It happened that in their case, it was very important to do that. And so they would basically rotate through that. Everybody got to understand that customer contact is a multi-channel thing, and it's an omni-channel thing. And they said, okay, we might not have, this is an important point, Christian, we might not have the technology today. We may not be able to afford it. We are going to have to budget for it for next year or the year after to have true omni-channel capabilities. But let's start developing an omni-channel mentality now. I think that may be a takeaway for people listening, is that you can start, forming your omni-channel mentality even before you have all of the capabilities to do it. It will mean that people will be prepped for the technology when it comes, and it will actually push probably the whole organization toward the omni-channel capabilities sooner.
I think that is a critical starting point, right? You have to have some senior leadership own the idea that this is what we're going to embrace. But I think the other part of it is that we find often is companies don't have expertise in implementing those things. They don't know what they don't know. They've never actually knocked down those silos. They've never run a system where they've integrated some of these other medias. And so when they need to go do that, sometimes they have to look outside of their organization if they don't have people internally that can actually help them get there. Because there's a lot of people that bite off more than they could chew. They'll say, hey, I want to start doing SMS. I want to start doing email. I want to start doing social media. And they just do it. And it just becomes another siloed product where it doesn't perform well. And now their customers are getting another avenue to have a poor experience, right? And so I think it's also really important that it's not just having the mindset, it's also making sure that you take ownership of what you don't know and finding how do you get those gaps filled so that if you are going to implement those strategies, that they're done appropriately.
Right.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely do that. Inform yourself, but also look outside your organization to folks who have embraced it, who have experience with it, and who can help you to get there faster and better, and without making the mistakes that others have had. Because you take professionals like yourself, like others, they've seen it before. They understand where the potholes are, and by embracing a partner that can really help you get to where you need to get, it's going to leverage you to a better place quicker.
Totally agree. Now, you've hit a great milestone. You've hit 150 episodes on your podcast. First of all, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I'd love to have that someday. But, for anyone who's interested, go check out CallTalk. Look at it on whatever podcast app that you have. Now, since you're obviously a fellow podcaster, there's been some things I've always wanted to know. You got any insights from your experience on it? Anything you could share?
Well, first of all, thanks so much. I mean, it's been quite a ride. It's been gratifying to get so much positive feedback since 2009 when we started this. So we've been going continuously since 2009 on a monthly basis. So we really feel we've made a positive impact. But, Christian, hey, you got this nailed. I think the important thing is to leverage your passion for our industry and to share your best insights with your audience. And when you do that, and when you've got people who are able to share along with you, then that's really what this is all about. It's not any more complicated than that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've always found helpful for me, and I learned a long time ago, is surround yourself with people smarter than you. So every time I come on to another episode, I'm always surrounded with people that are really smart and have a lot of experience. So it's a great learning experience for myself, and obviously for our audience as well. They get to learn things about people that didn't look at the contact center space as where they were going to find their next chapter in their career. And you get to see people's journeys into that space and the wonderful things you're doing. So obviously one of the things outside of work, of course, because like many of us, we do work a lot, but we have to find ways to unwind, how to disconnect. Anything in particular that's your favorite that you like to disconnect from work?
Swimming. I do a lot of pool swimming, and I also, being here in Santa Barbara, do swimming in the ocean, which is good. There's an organization called Reef and Run here, so you can do your competitions. In fact, this evening I'm going to be doing a 1 mile out in the ocean, and at the end of the month I'm slated to do another Alcatraz swim from Alcatraz, to San Francisco. So that's a lot of fun. And then reading, spending time with my family is what I really enjoy doing. I mentioned also that I'm a member of Rotary here in Santa Barbara, and assistant scoutmaster for the last decade. And also very active in the Italian community here in Santa Barbara, which is a lot of fun. A lot of fun people, and rewarding. So, yeah, those are the things that I do to unwind.
Well, fantastic. I sometime we're going to have to talk about that cold water going through Alcatraz, but for another times that we're running out of time today. But I want to make sure that everyone knows how to get a hold of you. There got to be people on here that say, I need to talk to Bruce. I need to sync up with Benchmark Portal. How do they connect with you?
Sure. Please write to me at Bruce. Forget the last name because it's a little bit tough. You can either do Bruce Belfiore at benchmarkportal.com or just Bruce at benchmarkportal.com. I'd love to hear from all of you, so please do get in touch. And remember the special offer for a NobelBiz discount for our online courses, if you'd like to do that as well.
Well, Bruce, that was very generous of you and Benchmark Portal. Obviously, for those of you who hadn't heard of Bruce or Benchmark Portal, you got to go connect with them. You have to see what they're doing. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on. Thanks so much for joining us today. And everyone, keep listening, and we're going to catch you on next episode.
Thank you, Christian.